Leo is sitting on the toilet at 7:14 in the morning in a pair of gym shorts he's owned since 2019, scrolling his brokerage app while his coffee gets cold on the bathroom counter. He's not expecting anything special. He checks the app every morning the same way some people check the weather. It's a habit. He's been doing it for 23 years, but this morning, the number on the screen has a comma in it that wasn't there yesterday. 7 figures, $1 million invested. He stares at it for a second, he tilts the phone, he refreshes, the comma is still there, and then Leo does the thing that nobody tells you about. He doesn't cry, he doesn't text his wife, he doesn't fist pump. He just kind of sits there in his gym shorts on the toilet and goes, huh? Okay. And then he gets up and starts brushing his teeth. This video is about why that's actually the right reaction and why the version they sold you on was a lie. Spent way too much time looking at what actually happens to people's brains, bank accounts, and lifestyles the moment they hit 7 figures invested. So if you've ever wondered whether the millionaire label still means anything in 2026 or what reaching it actually feels like in real life, drop a like and stay with me because we're going to break this whole thing down today. Before we get into it, let me paint you a picture of what we're actually dealing with here. Because the word millionaire has been hammered into our culture for about 100 years, game shows were built around it, songs were written about it, entire careers were promised on the back of it, and somewhere along the line, $1 million became shorthand for, you made it, you're done, you won. But the math behind that word has completely fallen apart, and most people haven't gotten the memo. $1 million in 1960 was the equivalent of about $11 million today. $1 million in 1990 was roughly $2.5 million in today's money. The word millionaire has lost something like 91% of its original punch, and nobody bothered to update the script. So here's what we're doing today. I'm gonna walk you through 3 things specifically. There's one tax nobody warns you about that quietly owns part of your million before you even spend $1 of it. We'll get to that. There's a survey result about how actual millionaires feel about their money that's going to break your brain when I show it to you. And there's a quote from Charlie Munger that explains the whole thing, but I'm saving that for the end because it's worth the wait. I'm not a financial advisor. This is just me running the numbers out loud. Okay, how rare is Leo, really? Forget the percentages for a second. Imagine a regular American street, 100 houses, white picket fences, beige siding, the same 3 SUV models in every driveway. Walk down it. Out of those 100 houses, about 18 of them have a millionaire inside. Sounds like a lot, right? Except only about 5 of those 18 got there the way Leo did, by investing in a 401k over 20 plus years. The rest are mostly house rich, cash poor, paper millionaires whose entire net worth is the 4 bedrooms they're standing in. And you can't tell which is which from the driveway. The guy in the leased BMW with the chrome grille almost certainly has less invested than the guy 3 doors down driving a 10-year-old Camry with a dent in the bumper. That's not a stereotype. That's actually what the data shows. The Ramsey study of 10,000 millionaires found the most common cars they drive are Toyotas and Hondas. Nobody is screaming about their wealth. The ones screaming about it usually don't have it. Here's the global picture. UBS, in their 2025 Global Wealth Report, says there are around 24 million US millionaires when you include everything. The house, the cars, the kids' piggy bank. The US created more than 379,000 new millionaires in 2024 alone. That's over 1,000 new millionaires per day. Leo is one of them. Globally, having $1 million invested puts you in roughly the top 1.6% of adults on the entire planet. Out of 8 billion people, Leo is in the top 130 million, statistically rare. But here's the thing, and we're going to keep coming back to this, statistically rare and actually rich are 2 very, very different categories, and the gap between them is where most of the confusion lives. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. And by interesting, I mean kind of brutal, because most people, when they fantasize about hitting $1 million, picture themselves living off the income, sipping coffee, doing nothing, watching the dividends roll in. Let me show you what the dividends actually look like. Leo's million is parked in a basic S&P 500 index fund. The S&P 500's dividend yield as of May 2026 is about 1.06%. That's an all-time historical low, by the way, because companies do buybacks now instead of paying out cash. But 1.06% on $1 million is $10,600 per year. So Leo's dividends pay him roughly $883 per month. That's $29 a day. You cannot eat Chipotle on $29 a day. Not in 2026, not with guac. So living off the dividends with $1 million is a fantasy. The math just doesn't work. Now, you might be thinking, well, Nick, what about the famous 4% rule? That's 40 grand a year, right? Historically, yes. The 4% rule, originally built by a guy named Bill Bengen in the 1990s, says you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio in year one, adjust for inflation, and reasonably expect not to run out of money over 30 years. But the modern numbers have shifted. Morningstar, who updates this every year, currently sits at 3.9% for 2026. So Leo could pull $39,000 a year. Bengen himself, in his 2025 book, actually revised his number up to 4.7% based on broader asset classes. So 39 to 47,000 a year, depending on whose model you believe. Let me put 39 grand in context. The average Social Security check in 2026 is about $2,081 a month. That's roughly $25,000 a year. So Leo's $1 million portfolio on the conservative end pays him about 1.6 times what the average retiree gets from Social Security. That's a comfortable supplement. That's not Beverly Hills, and here's the kicker. $39,000 a year is also right around the federal poverty line for a family of 4, which is a wild sentence to write. Leo's 7-figure portfolio, withdrawn responsibly, generates an income that the federal government considers borderline poor for a small household. So if Leo wants to quit his job tomorrow on this number alone, he can. He just has to live like he's broke to do it. Now here's the first open loop I promised, because we've been saying Leo has $1 million this whole time like it's actually $1 million. It isn't. Most of Leo's million is sitting in a traditional 401k, which means the IRS is essentially a roommate who's been living in his account rent-free for 23 years and is about to hand him the invoice on move-out day. When Leo pulls that money out in retirement, every single dollar is taxed as ordinary income at a blended retirement tax rate of around 25%. His $1 million is really about $750,000 of spendable cash. The IRS quietly owns the other quarter, they just haven't sent him the bill yet. If that same million had been in a Roth account, it would actually be a real, full, no strings attached million. So a Roth million is roughly equivalent to a traditional $1,330,000 in spending power. Same number on the screen. Completely different reality behind it. The difference between Leo and a Leo with a Roth is essentially a free $330,000. And it gets weirder. There's this little surcharge called the Net Investment Income Tax, NIIT for short, which slaps an extra 3.8% on top of your investment income once your modified adjusted gross income crosses $200,000 for a single filer. Here's the punchline. That threshold was set in 2013 and has never been indexed for inflation, not once. 12 years of stealth bracket creep, quietly catching more people every year. And nobody talks about it because nobody likes reading about taxes on YouTube. So when somebody tells you they have $1 million invested, the real question is, what kind of million? Because the tax authorities have already decided which version of the answer they prefer, and it's the version where you pay them. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Nick, this is a lot of cold water for a topic that's supposed to be a celebration. Hitting $1 million is still a huge deal. And you're right, it absolutely is. But here's why I'm being this blunt about it. The cultural mythology around the millionaire title is actively doing damage to people who are on track. Because they hit the number, they feel cheated, and they make bad decisions out of that feeling. They start chasing higher returns, they start gambling on options, they start swinging for $2 million because $1 million didn't feel like enough, and the math punishes them for it. The fix isn't to lower your expectations, it's to update what the number actually means in 2026, so you don't feel betrayed when you reach it. Here's the second open loop I promised, and this is the part that breaks people's brains. Northwestern Mutual ran a survey in 2025 called the Planning and Progress Study. They asked actual US millionaires, people with 1 million plus in investable assets, whether they consider themselves wealthy. The answer was no. 64% of them, almost 2 out of every 3, said they did not feel wealthy. The minority, most millionaires reject the label entirely, and it's not just modesty. Schwab runs an annual survey called the Modern Wealth Survey. In 2025, the average American said it now takes $2.3 million to be considered wealthy. In San Francisco, the number is 4.4 million. In Southern California, 3.4, so wealthy is no longer a million. Wealthy is roughly 2.3 of them. The Empowers 2025 data goes even further. Americans on average said they'd need 5.3 million to feel financially successful. Read that again. 5.3 million. The number we've all been chasing as the finish line is now barely a fifth of what the average person says they actually need to feel like they made it. Your brain is honestly the worst friend at a party. You finally hit your number, and it leans over and goes, "Cool, but have you seen what Dave has?" That's hedonic adaptation. A psychology professor at Wharton named Matt Killingsworth proved in 2023 that for most people, happiness keeps climbing with income forever. There's no magic plateau where you stop wanting more. Whatever your number is, you're gonna crave a bigger number once you hit it. And just so we're clear, this isn't because millionaires are ungrateful or broken, it's that the surrounding cost of life has quietly leveled up to meet them. The bar moved, the number didn't. Okay, now we're at the Munger quote. Stay with me, because this is the most important part of the entire video. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's old business partner, said the first $100,000 is well, I'll keep this PG, but he said the first $100,000 is the hardest dollar you'll ever earn, and you have to do whatever it takes to get there. Walk everywhere, skip the avocado toast, eat coupons for breakfast, whatever, because after that, the snowball starts rolling on its own. Adjusted for inflation, Munger's $100,000 benchmark today is more like $200,000 to $300,000, but the principle is identical. Once you have real capital, the math changes. Look at what just happened to Leo. He took 23 years to build his first million. That's the median timeline, by the way. The Ramsey National Study of Millionaires found across 10,000 respondents that most people take 25 to 30 years to get there. Only 5% reach it in under 10. But here's where it gets ridiculous. There's a thing in finance called the rule of 72. You take 72 and divide it by your annual return, and that's roughly how many years it takes for your money to double. So if Leo's million sits in the S&P 500 and earns an 8% real return, untouched, no new contributions, no withdrawals, it doubles to 2 million in about 9 years. Read that again. 23 years to build the first million, 9 years to build the second. Doing literally nothing, and it gets steeper from 2 million to 4 million, another 9 years, from 4 to 8, same 9 years. The math becomes almost insulting. You spend most of your adult life pushing a snowball uphill, and the second you crest the ridge, it starts rolling on its own and gathering more weight than you ever added by hand. Compounding is the only employee in America who shows up early, never asks for a raise, and somehow gets more productive the longer you ignore him. The first million is the down payment on freedom from grinding. The second one is when you start noticing the grinding has become optional, and the third one is when you forget you were ever grinding in the first place. This is the part nobody screenshots from finance Twitter, because it's boring, and patience makes for a terrible thumbnail. So what does Leo's life actually feel like now? Because this is where most videos about hitting a million completely whiff. It feels like the dog needs an emergency vet visit and the bill is $400, and Leo just nods and hands over the credit card without doing math in his head first. It feels like his mom calls and says her water heater died and she needs $1,800, and Leo just Venmos it to her before she finishes the sentence. It feels like booking a flight without checking the account balance first. It feels like his kid asks about going to a slightly better college and Leo doesn't immediately flinch. It feels like the 2 a.m. version of his brain, the one that used to wake him up doing mortgage math, has finally gone quiet. Not gone, not just quiet. Because there's a buffer underneath him now that didn't used to exist. It also feels like nothing changed. He still drives the same Camry, he still buys the same generic cereal, he still mows his own lawn on Saturdays. To anybody looking from outside, Leo's life looks identical to the version of it from 5 years ago. The shift is entirely internal. The shift is that The voice in his head saying, what if something goes wrong, has finally been outvoted by the voice saying, you can probably handle it. That's it. That's the whole thing. So practically, what should actually change once you cross the line? Leo needs a few things now that he didn't need before. He needs an umbrella liability insurance policy. $1 million umbrella runs about $200 to $400 a year, and it's a giant, cheap shield against lawsuits. Once you have assets worth suing for, you become a target. He needs estate documents, a will, a trust if he has kids, powers of attorney, boring paperwork that nobody wants to do at 25 but becomes genuinely important at 1 million plus. He needs to start thinking about his asset allocation. Sequence of returns, risk becomes real. A 30% market drop in year 1 of retirement on top of his withdrawal can take years to recover from. Bonds stop being boring and start being insurance. But here's what should not change: his lifestyle. Ramsey's study found 94% of millionaires live on less than they make. The biggest mistake at this stage isn't a bad investment, it's lifestyle inflation. Because the second your spending catches up to your portfolio, the freedom you were building gets quietly repossessed. So let me give you the actual answer to the title of this video. Here is exactly what it's like to reach 1 million invested in 2026. You feel safe, not rich. You stop doing 2 a.m. math about money you don't have, and you start doing different math about money you do. You stop flinching at small expenses. You start automatically saying yes to things you used to say maybe to. You're surprised by how unceremonial the moment is. You thought you'd cry, you didn't. You're also surprised by how nobody around you notices, because you didn't change. Your car didn't change, your house didn't change. The only thing that changed is a number on a screen that you happen to know about. The cultural milestone you've been chasing your whole adult life happens, and the world doesn't acknowledge it. You acknowledge it, maybe your spouse acknowledges it. That's the entire ceremony. You realize the second million is going to take a fraction of the time the first one took, and you'll barely notice it happening. You realize the prize wasn't actually the number. The prize was the moment your money started earning more in a year than you do, and you gotta keep your job anyway because you like what you do, and now you do it without the fear. Leo put his phone down. He didn't text his wife, he didn't post about it, he made himself a piece of toast, finished his coffee, and went to a 9 a.m. meeting because he had a deadline that afternoon. That's what hitting 1 million looks like in real life. A piece of toast and a deadline, and honestly, that's a much better version than the one they sold you on. Drop a like if this gave you a different way to think about the milestone. I'll see you in the next one.